Who should we talk to next? I picked the last two.
Sure. Xeno in South Korea thinks our epistemology is flawed.
Probably. Let's find out. Xeno, you're live with Eric and V.
Hey, Eric.
Hey! Geez, South Korea,
Hey.
we have people calling from England, from Mexico, and we're not even able to take everybody. I'm heartbroken. Xeno, thank you for calling in, though.
I know. Thank you so much. I just want to ask you two a question before I start.
Mm-hmm.
Are you learning anything from these calls, Eric?
Tons.
Oh, yeah.
Tons. So if you were to go back into like my very first episodes back when I was on Talk Heathen, I was an aggressive little shit. I mean, I was annoying, and people would like put in the comments and they go, "Oh God, Eric is such an annoying little prick." And I'd be like, "Oh no." Like, I think that,
No, that's really great to hear. It really is.
Well, taking the time, watching our episodes back, V and I really do break down and go, hey, where did we go wrong? What could we do better? What do we want to see in these conversations? And because of that, I'm still far from where I want to be, but I'm definitely a lot further than where I started.
Also, things like Chaos calling in and talking about meta time and realizing that's a crux that we have not explored yet. So we're going to go and do some more research on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, did you say meta time?
Yeah.
Meta time, apparently.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I just learned something new today, so I got to go back and
Maybe.
do some more grinding.
As
Who
a
knows?
concept,
Who
yeah.
knows?
Who the hell knows? Anyway, but
Okay,
I know, but you wanted to talk about our epistemology. So hit us.
So I simply believe that I want to lay this out in layman terms that I believe my epistemology is to understand cause and effect, and everything starts with a cause and effect. Maybe in a different universe it does not, but in our universe, yes, it does. I simply define. I think it's important to define God first. So I simply define God as the first cause.
Okay.
To whatever's going on in our life. That's what I define God as. So for example, the creators of Halo, they're the God of Halo. The creators of Tetris is the God of Tetris. That's how I define God.
Sure.
I'm not religious. I'm a deist.
Sure.
So my question to you is that if I choose to define God this way,
mm-hmm.
Don't you have to go with my definition and say, well, that's what you choose to define God as? Well, happy that's a good life. That's fine. How can you disagree with what I say?
Well,
God is?
so therein is the rub, because there's a difference between being heard and making sure that the terminology you're using is useful. So like if you're going to say that, the cause of the universe is God, and that's all to the definition, and if I accept that the universe had a beginning, then I'd be like,
then God exists?
Well, that definition, sure. And you know what? Lots of people have given me definitions of God that I've entirely agreed with, because they're entirely, just forward. Somebody says, well, God's just like the universe, man. Cool. Well, then that God exists. Yeah. Dude, you've talked to people who've thought that. Don't even. I mean, geez, I think there was a time when I thought that. But the reason I changed and flexed on it is because I wanted to have more in-depth conversations, and I realized that using that definition prevented those conversations from happening.
I see. And I was that way. I'm not going to lie. I was an atheist. I hate saying that, but I really was an atheist. But what got me to change from my atheist position was this whole thought of, and I hate the thought that, well, if I come from something that has to be the first domino, it's not this guy with a beard, but there's so much in the world that we don't understand. There's so many question marks, and I have to come from something. I'm not saying it's this big old guy in the sky that's making everything, but I have to understand that I must come from something. And what is that?
Well,
what is that singularity? What is that thing that I come from? You know what I mean?
It's called a womb.
Well, yeah.
No, I mean, so where does the womb come from? You could go back. You could, what's the term I'm looking for here? When you break things down, my mind is not straight.
No, yeah, reductio ad absurdum. It's a
Thank you so much. I hate that term.
It's a common theme
when
today.
you reduct it to
To the
absurdity.
beginning.
We know that the womb didn't just exist. Something had to exist before the womb. And I woke up today thinking, you know what? I'm not even responsible for my fingers. I usually don't wake up thinking this. I was thinking like, I'm not even responsible for my fingernails. So there's something that created that. And I think the cells are the real geniuses here. And then there has to be something behind those cells. So I start going back all the way to, okay, well, where did this start?
So it sounds like there are two different conversations being had. What is and why is. Mm-hmm. And the question of why, it sounds like what you're hung up on. And it's
a good question. Like that is the thing. And because Xeno, you seem like somebody who is an honest interlocutor, I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, you know what? There are people, and I do this when I think it's going to be, twisted later on, who do say, oh, well, you came from your parents and your parents came from their parents. And, why are we even having this conversation? But there is a larger philosophical just bigness in really trying to grapple with why is there something?
Yeah. And
that's huge. And how the individual person who I might be talking to conceives of that bigness, what words they use really isn't any of my concern at all. I don't need to have you prove why you use the word God to define the answer to that question in your own mind. The only time that I would have any kind of concern is if you then said you also have to have this answer to the question. That's the only conflict there for me.
Yeah, can I offer an alternative?
Sure.
Okay, so if we get into the why question, right? Well, why does this happen? It kind of infers that there's value being put on a thing that's outside of yourself, and I feel like that makes us NPCs if you play video games.
Oh my God.
Right? Like
Look, I program. I know it's way too much about that, but go on.
Yeah. If we are just being slotted into another plan that's not your own, if you are just subject to, a value that's given to you, I feel like that takes a lot of the color out of the world. And I think these kind of conversations often get to a point where somebody, at least for me, I got really depressed. I was like, well, shit, if I don't have some grand, some part of the grand scheme, if I'm not, somehow necessary in the, moving forward of humanity, then what's the point? But
well, can I stop you there for a second? It's not why. Well, I do wonder why, but there's also understanding that it is simply that is. Like, even if I don't understand why, like I don't understand why something happens, that doesn't negate the fact that it's there. So I guess and I'll call you next week and maybe we can like unpack this a little bit more because I know you got to get to other callers. But what I want to say is I understand that is, it just simply is. Yeah. Forget the why. But do you agree with the fact that there may be like a single point where we come from? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, maybe.
Like something had to build off of something else, right, to get here. I'm not saying time, space, and matter comes from a quote-unquote God, but don't you think that everything, if we can rewind it back to a certain point, everything comes from something, and there had to probably have been a single point?
It seems to intuitively make sense. The best that I can do is kind of defer to people who dedicate their lives to understanding it better. Because the best I can give you is, I don't know. If it were the case, then okay. If it weren't the case, then, either way, I want to learn more. And what I really hope, though, is that people who are told that, I like your definition, right? What you started with, right? You define God as that which, the beginning of the universe. I worry that might cause a little less interest in people wanting to observe it instead of, going, well, I want to know more about what it is. That kind of Sagan approach of wonder about the unknown. And so I just
I guess I'm taking a more pragmatic approach, like in trying to leave emotions out. And I do get emotional, don't get me wrong. But the pragmatic approach is just to understand the facts and that things come from something, right? And my belief, I'm a deist. I don't believe any religions, by the way. But I believe that God
we figured
even has something that it comes from. And I have no idea what that would be. But God isn't the end all be all to me. God is simply like, to me, we're just talking. This is just subject at hand, and there are more complex topics out there other than God. But because we're talking about God, I would say that it's just wherever we come from. It's why we have gravity. It's why we have time, space, and matter. But with that, Eric, I'll let you move on to other calls because I know you don't have that much time left.
I would love to
Unless you wanna
continue
add
this
something.
conversation again. So,
Okay.
Xeno, if you want to call back in, I have additional questions that mostly just relate to, the pragmatics of using that word and how we
Sure.
how we bring that into conversation and why. But that would spin us off in a whole other direction.
Oh,
So
V is totally the pragmatist. So like that is a conversation that I want to see had. So I hope you do call back in.
Well, look, I've been banned from everywhere, and I swear it's not my fault. So I really appreciate the time you guys are taking to talk to me because I have to release it somewhere, and I'm just glad I can talk to you two about it.
Well, so far it's been a very pleasant interaction, and if you call back next week, we'll take your call.
Yeah.
All right, it'll be about the exact same thing, and maybe I can go a little bit further and pick your brain, Eric and V. So
Perfect.
Sounds
you
good.
guys take care. Okay?
You too.
Bye.
Take care, Xeno. Why would they get banned, I wonder?
I don't know. He seems like a nice person.
Yeah.
But,
You never know.
we don't know.
Yeah.
At least he didn't play a bunch of porn at the end of it, like the other guy.
Yeah, that's true.